Fucking leaf blowers. It's wet. Everything is stuck together. Okay, this makeup makes me look a little ghostly. Okay, whatever. It's fine. Maybe I can... Hello, folks. Welcome back to my channel. Alright, we are going to do my June wrap-up. Again, I have, like, no notes beyond titles and authors, so we'll see how that goes. So I read 14 in June. 14 books. We're going to talk about 16. It'll make sense. So the first book, I actually finished in May, and I completely forgot to talk about it. And I don't know why, because it was great. That was Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. This is the first in what's going to be a several book series. This was a lot of fun. I think I was definitely still in a bit of a reading slump when I was reading it. And it didn't fully bring me out of it. But it was definitely like, yeah, this is fun. I'm enjoying this more than I have the past couple of books, but I can tell that, like, there's like a little bit of a barrier to me loving it. But I did really, really enjoy it. I definitely look forward to learning more about the rest, or reading more books in the series. This has definitely been compared to the famous wizarding school series that must not be named, and there's definitely some major plot and setting points that line up pretty clearly. It's definitely like a story that is written for current times. I really like... Here's my problem with not having notes. I liked the conversations on... So in Amari's mortal, human, non-magical world, she is a... what's the word? Scholarship. There we go. She's like a scholarship student to a prestigious school. Fucking leaf blowers. It's wet! Everything is stuck together. So she is a scholarship student in her very prestigious prep school, and because of that, she definitely feels out of place. She is made to feel out of place. Some of it is racialized, but it's also clearly like an economic aspect. And that theme is translated to her being in the School of Magic because she didn't know about it. She hasn't grown up knowing the history. She doesn't know these famous people. She doesn't, they're testing these kids on all of this, like, history and, magical laws and things that people have been learning about, have been steeped in this culture, and now she has to, like, take a crash course in it and try and memorize as much as possible in a few weeks. So she definitely feels like she doesn't belong. I guess it's like a commentary on the way that institutional racism and institutional elitism prevents people who do deserve to be there from feeling like they deserve to be there. Like, she clearly has the magical talent and the aptitude. Like, she belongs there because she has magic. So she belongs in a magical school. That should be a no-brainer. But because she wasn't raised in it, she is made to feel like an outsider and made to feel like she doesn't belong there because of what has been denied to her. That's the thing. She feels like she doesn't belong, not through any fault of her own, but because of what has been denied to her. I'm absolutely looking forward to reading more from this series. And if you have been thinking about it and haven't picked it up yet, I think it is quite deserving of the hype. Okay. That's not even a book I read in June. Okay, here we go. Alright, so the next couple of books I'm going to talk about together. So I finished up the the next 4 books, last 4 books in the Seventh Tower series. So that so that's book 3, Aenir, book 4, Above the Veil, oop, shiny, book 5, Into Battle, and book 6, the Violet Keystone. I want to say the Violent Keystone. It's violet because the magic is color spectrum based. So I've talked about the first couple books in this series in previous wrap-ups, and I just because these are like middle grade ones and I could read one of these a day fairly easily, I just wanted to finish out the series. I made a list of like all the series I need to finish, and I needed to start crossing stuff off instead of just adding to it. So anyway, this is a middle grade series by Garth Nix. I enjoyed it. Again, like my favorite thing about Garth Nix's books are his magic system, his world building, the lore and the history, and the way that like different magic systems will interact with each other. Character development's a little bit rocky, like I can't close the window because we have our fans stuck in it, and we've built these frames, the open part of the window, and then also there's a slot to put air filters in when we get to smoke season, so I can't close the window. We're just gonna keep going. I'm just gonna have to project. I'm gonna need to use my theater voice. Okay. Character development is a little bit rocky. There's definitely a tension between Tal and Mila. There's a lot of like classism stereotypes and stereotypes. Not quite discrimination. What is it? He's just the way that they look down on each other because they come from different worlds. And that continues pretty thoroughly through book 3 and like into book 4. And I felt like by that point they'd been through enough that conflict felt forced. It's like y'all have like had to like put each other's lives on the line and have shown your loyalty to each other enough. Like why are you still doubting each other? Why are you still like holding on to what you have been told when you've already been through 3 whole books of challenging that belief? So that was a little bit like you're just hammering that point home because you don't really know how to develop it yet. But like overall, I felt like the overall plot was fleshed out. That's enough of that. So that was 4 books that I read. Okay, so the next book I picked up was Sweethand. Sweethand is a fairly new release contemporary romance that takes place in Trinidad. This was super cute. There's a lot in there about food and pastries, so that was delicious. There definitely gets to be a little bit of steam in there. It's less steamy than a lot of the other stuff I read. But it was super sweet. I think, so this revolves around enemies or like rivals to lovers that are placed in proximity because their best friends are getting married, so they are assigned to be best man and maid of honor, so they have to plan like the bridal shower and everything together. And I think I also really enjoyed it because I am in the process of wedding planning, so I was kind of like, and I'm in early stages of wedding planning, so like reading about the process still feels like relatable and fun, and it doesn't feel stressful yet. So we'll see how that goes like 3 months from now. But it was super, super sweet. I felt like the ending was a little bit rushed. It was like they had their final like miscommunication argument, and then one of them apologizes to the other, and then the book ends and they're happy. And it's like, okay, but where is, I feel like what it needed was like one more like steamy makeup scene, you know, or just like one more like, did they just like make up in the moment, or is this going to actually develop? And like you've shown me that the foundation is solid. Can you show me a little bit of like what this relationship grows into? But this is supposed to be the first in a series, so maybe we'll get to see a little bit of them in the background in future books. But that was kind of like my one critique, was like the ending felt a little bit like, and everything's fine. The end. The next book I finished was Highland Treasure by Lynsay Sands. This is a Scottish Highlander romance. It's, for me, for my taste, it was kind of forgettable. It was just kind of like someone recommended this series. So I hear that term a lot, Scottish Highlander romance, and I never really know what it means. So like, cool, let me just read one, and I'm like, okay, what is the appeal? Is it like fun with kilts? Is that why we like Scottish romances? I don't really know. I haven't quite figured it out. Also, this did the thing that is a trope that I feel like historical romances do a lot, and I don't like, which is when the heroine is a virgin, and especially in a historical romance, it's a lot of like, she literally knows nothing about her body. And the whole, like, the taking of her virginity thing, it's like, I don't like that. Or it's like, you gotta treat it real delicately. And this one was one that was like, not it. And I feel like, and it just kind of, it was a thing that made me kind of wonder, like, is that what the appeal of historical romances are? Is a way to justify one or both of the characters being virgins and, like, being fixated on that? Because, like, I am not here to romanticize that. It shouldn't be that big of a deal, in my opinion. Now, maybe you like the, you know, when a story treats it as, like, something special of, like, these people coming together for the first time. And, like, you know, I can kind of get it, but it's just, it's not for me. So, anyway. I think it was fine, but it was just a lot of, like, here I am trying a thing that lots of people like. I am not yet sold. I don't yet see what the big deal is. Okay. Okay. Okay, the next book I read was definitely one of the highlights of the month. This was Transcendent Kingdom by Gyasi. I am not really big on contemporary fiction, or just like fiction. Like, I'm very big into genre fiction. But this one sounded right up my alley, and it was. I definitely loved the conversations about like the tension between, like, religion and science, and the way religion has, like, done harm, but also the way that it can be supportive to people. It wrestled with the question that I fucking love in conversations of religion and science, is they are both looking at, like, the essence of being human, the essence of, like, why do these things happen? Like, you can explain the biological process of whatever on paper, but science has yet to determine, but why do people do this? But why do people want this? It's like, yeah, we can trace, you know, like, they're, like, both of these conflicting sides deal with the most essential, invisible why. And I fucking loved it, and I thought the writing was great. There's a little bit of queer rep in here, which I feel like not a lot of people mention, but, like, our main character does have some exploration of her sexuality. I don't think she really adheres to labels, but she does have some non-hetero explorations, and I for some reason I felt like that's not discussed a lot. Like, it's not the focus of the story, but it's done in a way that feels, like, genuine, and, like, yeah, like, we should show that there are people who kind of explore stuff and don't have, like, a huge revelation, or there's just enough going on in their lives where they don't really feel like exploring that label right now. That's something that, like, I want to see more of. This book was great. I would definitely check out other works by Gyasi. Hurrah. Okay, so the next book I picked up was The Witch King by Hedgmon. This was a book I was quite interested in after watching Perpetual Page's review of this series, and then their interview with the author was really interesting. It's a fairly new release YA fantasy with a trans protagonist, and it deals a lot with, like, the anger and mistrust, and I want to describe it as prickliness, but that's like too cutesy a word, but like the way that people who have been hurt and have been betrayed just have this like prickly hard shell against even like the best of intentions, because they've been hurt. hurt people, and hurt people just, they move through life trying to avoid hurt, but not really understanding that like not all hurt is damaging. Some hurt is just the difficulty of life. But anyway, also like I liked the magic of this. I liked the way that like the different magical races were illustrating like other tensions that are relatable in the human world. The language is very young, very like quotes that I, as a 30-year-old old person, 32-year-old old fogey, I'm like, I don't know anyone who actually says that. I only see those kinds of phrases in memes and stuff. It's very much what is it, like Gen Z or whatever. So the language is, which, I mean, the characters are that age range, so it didn't bother me too much, but it was very much like, if these characters were not teenagers, this language would feel like I'm reading some kind of like internet meme chat room. It really caught my attention, because it's just so much of a way of speaking that I don't do, and like most people in my life don't do, because I don't really hang out with a lot of like 16 and 19-year-olds. Anyway, so like that's not even a critique. It's just a thing that I'm like was hyper aware of, that I don't think everyone would feel hyper aware of. But overall, the book was great and entertaining, and it's going to be a duology, so I am looking forward to seeing how it concludes, because it kind of ends on the cliffhanger. It ends on like a, oh, by the way, I need to tell you, this thing happened and we need to go take care of it. And you're like, yeah, what the fuck are you going to do about that? Anyway, it's great. The next book I read was a dark romance. This is Desperate Measures by Katee Robert. She's doing a series of twisted Disney tales. This one is Jasmine and Jafar. Everyone who's read this book talks about like it's like daddy baby girl kink, which I'm like, I really can take it or leave it. I felt like it was a little bit weird in this one, because we're also dealing with Jasmine's father being like abusive and controlling, and then he gets killed, and immediately afterwards she's kind of thrust into this weird relationship. So I felt like the trauma of her father and then like this daddy baby kink was like a little bit too close together for my comfort, but it's also like a fucking dark romance, so I was just like, okay. Like I wasn't turned off by it, but I was just like, this is really not going to be for everyone. Okay. I did really like that there is like a play of non-consent where like Jasmine kind of likes to say no and be chaste. You know, it's within a scene, they're playing at it, and Jafar really makes a point of like, before they start whatever they're doing, he makes her say her safe word, and so we know that like her reluctance and her refusal is part of the game. It is not a real boundary. So I did think that the book did a good job of clarifying when certain behaviors were part of a fantasy rather than reality. We get introduced to quite a few other Disney characters. We get introduced to Tink, Captain Hook, Hades, Meg, and there's going to be like a whole series of these books. So I am interested to read more books in the series, just to kind of see what she does with them. Like, I liked it. It's not my favorite, but it's interesting. Okay, the next book I finished, I listened to the audiobook of White Trash, The 400-Year Untold History of Class in America. I have this book. Stand by. Alright. I listened to the audiobook of this chunky thing. So, I mean, it looks super chunky, but, so it looks like a really chunky book, but this amount is all citations and notes. So this is by Nancy Isenberg and narrated by, I did not finish my notes. So I will put the name, where will I put it? Probably here, of the narrator. So this was okay. I think I gave it 3 stars. It might be like, I mean, it's kind of hard to really judge because with an audiobook, my attention's kind of tuning in and out. This is very much a names, dates, places, linear timeline info dump history, which is not my favorite. I definitely prefer like either like a sociological or like psychological analysis of history. So that was already a struggle for me. But the other thing was I felt like the perspective was very narrow. I felt like it was the story of class as told by the upper class, which to a point makes sense because when you're looking at like documents and journal entries and who's crafting laws and shit like that, it is educated, power-holding people who are literate, and a lot of the people who are being talked about are illiterate, so they could not write letters or leave journal entries and stuff to leave their own thoughts about things. And they are also, you know, they're not lawyers arguing for or against a case. Like, so there's not a lot of record of their voices. So, like, to a point, it makes sense, but it really felt like, here's what they were called, here's what they were treated, here's why they were malnourished, but, like, we don't get any perspective of, okay, but what was the day-to-day experience like for the poor people in America, for the, like, indentured farmers and the poorest, starving landowning classes, and, you know, when they talk about people who, you know, the clay eaters and the people who were so malnourished that they developed these hereditary physical characteristics because of their malnourishment, we never really learn about, like, okay, but why are there whole communities eating this thing or not eating that thing, and what is their take on it? What is their take on how they are being talked about? And I really felt like we didn't get any of that. And I felt like, while it is definitely focusing on white trash, like the white lower class, I feel like you cannot talk about it without really talking about how this country has treated black people as a class. And I felt like it was avoided. Like, that distinction was not really connected. And, like, there are some moments where, like, it's kind of like you can't really talk about what's happening in the Civil War without talking about what happens when the black slaves are freed and they're now competing in the job market. Like, she brought it up sometimes, but I felt like you can't talk about it without talking about the context of black laborers in this country. And I felt like she avoided it a lot. And it was kind of a disservice to the context of the whole book. But things that, like, were interesting, like, the whole discussions about, like, eugenics and the way that, like, eugenics thinking has been built into our laws, how some of our presidents and our you know, famous lawmakers and stuff have bought into that idea, and the way that influenced a lot of our thinking, the way that it influenced, like, laws about marriage and procreating and like, forced sterilization and that, like, I'm, you know, not really surprised by it, but it was kind of interesting to see that, like, these specific laws came about because of eugenics thinking about who is worthy of reproducing. It was interesting. I bought it secondhand. I bought it in conjunction to read with Dying of Whiteness, which I will talk about in my July wrap-up. And I did find there were some points of listening to the audiobook of Dying of Whiteness where I was thinking about things I had read in this book. So I do feel like it gave me a foundation. I mean, that's kind of how I like to learn about issues, is I don't just read one book very thoroughly. I want to listen to, like, a dozen books, and then they all kind of start to build on each other and fill in the gaps. So I'm glad to have read it, but it just, like, where I felt like something was missing, plus the fact that it's just like a very dense names, dates, places history, it was not really great for me. But if you are like a super history buff, I do think it's interesting. And I do think that it provides like an interesting perspective of trying to like just like wrap your head around the whole fucking mess of this country. Okay, moving on. The next book, I read a lot of romances this month. Can you tell I was in a slump? Now you can. Alright, so the next book I finished was The Earl I Ruined by Scarlett Peckham. This is the second book in this series, was it like on Charlotte Street. So this one follows the sister of the first book, which is, I don't remember. I mean, this one was fun. In reading this one, I had the realization that this series is like dark romance light, where it doesn't have like the tension and dark themes and super kinky kind of weird power play stuff that's in like some dark romances, but it's definitely not like a fluffy romance. And there's definitely, but like compared to like some other stuff I've read, like it's pretty easygoing. There is some steam, but it takes a bit to get there. This one does have a virgin heroine, and I think I've kind of forgotten how that whole thing gets navigated, but I felt like how it was navigated in the beginning I kind of liked. Because instead of it being like this super precious thing that like there wasn't so much pressure on ruining her, but there was just like, you know what, like I know that if I take your virginity, that's going to make your future really difficult, and I don't want to fucking do that. So let's try some other things instead. Like we can still like indulge in each other without worrying about that specifically. So I think I liked that, and this series is definitely like conflicting personalities that actually find that they are really misinterpreting each other, and they are actually quite people who come at each other with misinterpretations of the other person, and there's like a lot of discovery of like, oh, who this person really is, and oh, they're actually not that judgmental about me, and I have judged them too harshly. So there's a lot of that. I'm currently reading the third book, and it is a lot of that. It's actually the most different of the three books. But anyway, I enjoyed it. I would recommend this series to somebody who has never really delved into dark romance and kind of wants to test the waters a little bit. Okay, so the next book I finished was We Unleash the Merciless Storm by Taylor K. Mejia. This is the sequel to We Set the Dark on Fire, which is a sapphic romance series that deals with a dystopian alternate reality where highborn women are trained to be wives in this very strict social hierarchy where every man has two wives. They have the primera and the segunda. And the primera is like your political wife. She runs the household. She goes with you to, galas and house gatherings, and she is the wife as the business partner. And then the segunda is raised to be passionate. She is raised to be the one who has sex and bears the children, while the primera is like it is really, really going around like the virgin whore dichotomy. It's like you can have both, just not in the same person. You have to have your virgin and you have to have your whore. It is a YA, so it's not phrased quite so crassly, but it is like, it's a really interesting take on really, really strict social hierarchy and like a very, very gendered hierarchy world. So anyway, of course, like there's a revolution happening, and so in the first book we are following the primera, who marries this very powerful man and then is pulled into being a spy, and then spoiler, because we're talking about the sequel now. Okay, while I'm holding up the book, it'll be spoiler. And then when the book goes down, I will be done. So by the end of the first book, we realize the Segunda has been a double agent all along and now has to run away. So now in the second book, we are following Carmen the Segunda. So it is a very different tone because we're following a very different personality character as she has run away, and then and the romance is that the Primera and the Segunda have fallen in love with each other. Daniela and Carmen are in love with each other, and that's super sweet. So we are now following Carmen as she's trying to find her place in this revolution that has started to change tactics, and she's like not really she agrees with the goals, but she's like, your tactics are changing. What the fuck is going on? Something is not right with your methods. This isn't what I was raised in. But then she is also very worried about Danny, and because Danny has been left with a super powerful person, the husband, and if her cover's blown, she will absolutely be executed, no question, or tortured for information, or tortured and held as bait. None of it good. So it's also a rescue story of Carmen trying to get back to Daniela, and then also questioning whether anything that they had, was it real? So anyway, it's not quite a contemporary because it is a dystopian, but it's not fantasy, it's not sci-fi, but and it's still very romance heavy, which can be really hit or miss with me, but I felt quite invested in the story. I really like the conversations about just how a revolution happens, and the big ways and the small ways that people can fuel a revolution and support a revolution was interesting. Okay, I guess I'm not really talking about spoilers anymore. But anyway, yeah, I mean, honestly, the first book I picked up as a cover buy, I thought it might be a fantasy, and it's not, but I was invested. I thought it was a very, very solid second book and conclusion to this duology. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Then I read The Deep by Rivers Solomon, and then it is all, there are other authors credited, David Diggs, William Hutson, and Jonathan Snipes, who are members of a musical group called Clipping, because some of their songs and their artistic work was so heavily influential in this book that it felt fair to credit them as partial authors of this book. So this is a novella, if you somehow don't already know about it. This is a novella, short novel, that follows the mermaids who were born from pregnant slaves thrown overboard during the Middle Passage. Hell of a setup. And then, culturally, because they have such painful memories of their origin, they have one member who is the person who remembers everything and carries the memories so other people don't have to. And with the memory keeper that we're following, it is killing her. It's killing her. She probably will not survive to be able to pass this stuff on. So it is about, apart from the actual story of how these beings came about, it is also this beautiful, tense, dark, beautiful story about the importance of memory, the heaviness of memory, and the importance of, and the thing that's really interesting about it is it is one thing when you are carrying this burden alone, and it is another thing when you are sharing this memory with other people, when it is a community that is carrying this history together. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. It's my first book I've read by Rivers Solomon, and I'm so excited to read more things from them. So this was another standout of the month where I just devoured this book. Yeah. 6 stars. 6 out of 5 stars. Great. Okay, we're almost done. Okay, so these next 2 books I'm going to kind of talk about together. So the last book of the month I finished was Thief of Shadows by Elizabeth Hoyt, which is the 4th book in the Maiden Lane series. I started with the 4th book. Someone recommended it and said, yes, you could start this. You could read it as a standalone. You could start with this book. And then I enjoyed it so much that I went back and read the first book, which is Wicked Intentions by Elizabeth Hoyt. So technically I finished it in July, but like I finished them so close together that it's like it's kind of one experience. I want to talk about them together. So these are a historical dark romance that follows, so far, the family members who are running this orphanage in, is it London? I assume it's London. I don't know. So they live in this rough part of town because that's where the orphanage is, and you're immediately dealing with the themes of why do you need an orphanage? Because you have children who are abandoned because their parents were prostitutes, their parents died, their parents succumbed to sickness or starved to death. These children are rescued from sexual and labor slavery. Sometimes they fail to rescue them, and they lose track of what happens to them, and we don't know what happens to these children. So already that context is pretty fucking dark. So in the fourth book, we are following a figure of this region called the Ghost of St. Giles. He's kind of like a dark Robin Hood masked vigilante figure. And then he's kind of rumored to be not real. But then this highborn widowed lady finds him injured, takes him home and patches him up and doesn't remove his mask because she feels like that would be disrespectful and also like an abuse of power when he's lying like half naked and injured in her bed. But sparks immediately fly with them. And then they together are, and then like they meet in real life with the guy outside of his mask. So there's a little bit of them figuring out who each other is, and but they are following this mystery of children are being stolen. So the orphanage is being told, hey, so there is a woman who has just died in this house. She has children. We need to go get the children and bring them into the home so that they have a safe place to sleep and whatever. But then by the time they get there, the children are gone. And this is happening enough times that like, oh, someone is taking the children. So it's following who is taking them and why, and searching for them. And it is a dark, violent, adventurous, swashbuckling adventure. It is quite steamy. Now this series, in addition to the other historical ones, made me think about the way that virginity is talked about in historical romances, because 2 for 2 in these books, our heroine is a widow. So we're not worrying about virginity so far in these books. So it's refreshing to see these women who have desires, who are discovering what they want. In Thief of Shadows, the woman is very much like she's highborn, so she definitely has a freedom to explore her sexuality more than like a lower class woman might. But it's interesting to still like have the partners discover each other, and especially in Thief of Shadows, what I really love is even though the woman and the man are of very different social hierarchies, when they are together, they are equals. And it takes a little bit of work for them to get there, but they do kind of come to this arrangement of like, behind closed doors, we are equal to each other. Okay, so I really enjoyed that one. So I went back and read the first one. I think I was very much predisposed to enjoy the first one because I really enjoyed the second one. And this one, our hero is definitely less likable. He is an asshole. And he has the narrative of, I am an unfeeling monster. I am incapable of love. I am undeserving of love. And the thing that popped into my head was the plot line of The Bride Test, which the hero in that one kind of has the same attitude about himself of like, I am incapable of emotions, therefore I cannot express love, therefore I am not deserving of it. Now in The Bride Test, it's because he's autistic. And in this historical, like, even if we were acknowledging a neurodivergent character, we didn't have that word in the time period that this book takes place in. So that's the similarities of plot kind of end there. But I had that thought of, oh, this is going to be a journey of him discovering that no, he does feel things. He is capable of love. He is deserving of love. He's got some unlearning of this shit to do. And that does happen. And there is a plot line that is introduced where it's like showing his relationship with his mother. And it definitely starts to be a little bit of like, he is such a broken human being because his mother didn't love him enough. The plot doesn't stay there. I don't want to like get into it more because it's a little bit of a spoiler. But like, it doesn't stay with blaming the mother. Like, that relationship does get like fleshed out and developed in a way that feels good and not misogynistic. So if you got to that point and you're like, this feels gross, that part gets better, I promise. And then the woman, so in this case, the man is the higher born, and he's looking for a killer. So this is another like mystery, but now it's a murder mystery. And he hires the oldest sister that works at the orphanage to be his guide because he needs to go question people in this part of town that he is not familiar with. And she is a widow, and she is dealing with a lot of internal demons about like her own sexual desires. And it's not so much that like she's wrestling with society telling her that she is wrong and deviant for wanting these things, for having these desires. And so like her relationship with this, so there is like some like wiggly consent with her and this man, but it's not so much that like she doesn't want what he's doing to her or what he's proposing to her. It's that she is wrestling with recognizing that she does want these things, and she feels like she's not supposed to. So like her arc is like overcoming this and realizing that like with the right partner, like the desire is not the problem. You find the right partner and like your desires are met, and it can be totally fucking fine. And you know, the shame and guilt doesn't really need to be a part of it. But it is quite a journey for them. It's a big emotional journey for them to get there. So anyway, yeah, I think like I really enjoyed this story because like I love a lot of like power play and like emotional tension, like not just pining and angst, but a lot of like push and pull, like each character learning what power they have over the other, and like this whole like, how are they gonna make this work? Because like it's clear that they want each other, but like there's all these like mental barriers and societal barriers, and I really like the push and pull of these characters figuring out one, that they're attracted to each other, and two, that like it's fucking fine, and they're gonna make each other quite happy. And society be damned to a point. But I also love everything that's going on around them. I love like the murder mystery or like the missing children mystery. I love like the whole swashbuckling adventure around the romance. I also really love. So I really look forward to reading the rest of the series. I know that in book 3 we are dealing with a pirate king that is introduced in the first book. They're dark romances. They're not going to be for everyone, but I am eating them up. What can I say? Let's not read into it too much. Oh my god, I've been filming for over an hour. Shit. Okay, that's it. That's the video. Those are all the books I read. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have a good rest of your day. I encourage you to go out into the world and be curious. I will have my other social media links in the description box below, along with the list of all the books I talked about. Yeah, and I will catch you folks in my next video. Bye!